Good afternoon to all my dears. As usual, hope you fine. So last class we complete our last chapter, last unit, and we discuss about collocation. So I hope you understand very well about that activities. Now we can move to a new unit, a beautiful unit, that is tales and tunes. Yes, our second unit, tales and tunes. So before starting our chapter, do you like stories? Yes, everyone likes stories. And who tells stories to you? Definitely, our grandparents tell stories to you. And do you tell stories to anyone? Yes, okay. So here we are going to learn some stories. Page number 36. Let's begin. March 20 is the World Storytelling Day. Stories have come down to us from our elders and books. Stories once heard must be passed on. If we don't, the stories and the art of storytelling will slowly disappear from the earth. Here there are two questions. Some questions are. Do you like listen to stories? Our first question is, do you like to listen the stories? Do you like to listen the stories? Yes, very good. What kind of stories would you like to listen? What kind of story? There are a lot of stories. Animal stories, ghost stories, fearing stories, comic stories, like that. Who tells you stories? That before already we asked question. Who tells stories? Yes, our elder persons like father, mother, grandparents, etc. Do you tell stories? Yes, do you tell stories to your sisters or brothers or your cousins? Like that. Now, here we are going to read a story of Vimel and his grandmother. Let's read. Read what Vimel's grandmother has to tell him about story. Here, Vimel has a beautiful grandmother and he always tells many stories to Vimel. Vimel is a lucky boy. He has a grandmother who tells him a lot of stories. Every night at bedtime, there is a story for him. What fantastic stories grandmother has told Vimel. Stories of animals and birds, of clever and senseless peoples, of magic and music, stars and sages, and many more. So Vimel has a grandmother and his grandmother ready to tell a lot of stories. Every night he had a story. His grandmother ready to tell a different varieties of stories to Vimel. And the fantastic stories, the various types of stories are animals and birds, clever and senseless persons, magic and music stories, stars and sages stories, and many more stories Vimel's grandmother tell to Vimel. So that's why Vimel is a lucky person. One day, Vimel asked his grandmother if stories grew on trees. And there is an interesting question from Vimel. Vimel asked to his grandmother, Vimel asked his grandmother if stories grew on trees. And grandmother replied that she laughed and said, no, not on trees. And grandmother says that, no, not on trees. Then where do we get the stories from? Then Vimel asked the next question, where do we get the stories from? I got them from my grandmother. And grandmother says that, I got stories from my grandmother. I, in turn, tell you. Yes, I got stories from my grandmother. Vimel, remember to tell your friends these stories. And he pointed to Vimel and says that you tell these stories to your friends so that can also enjoy them. So that persons, your friends also can enjoy while hearing the stories. But Vimel said, no, I don't want to tell them any of these stories. But Vimel replied that I never tell these stories to anyone. They are my stories. Yes, these stories are mine. I never tell to anyone. My treasure. The stories are my treasure. I don't want to give them anyway. So, I don't want to give them anyway. I never tell any of these stories to anyone. Don't be silly, my boy. Then grandmother says that, don't be silly, my boy. Stories are meant to be told. So, stories are told. You should tell your stories to anyone. Listen and tell. That's the law of the story kingdom, his grandmother said. Then his grandmother says that stories are tell and that the law. Stories and listen. Stories are just like listen and tell. That is the law of the stories kingdom, his grandmother said. This is the story of Vimel and his grandmother. A short paragraph, a short story. And here is a question. What's your opinion about grandma's statement? What's your opinion? Is it correct? Yes. There is a law of stories kingdom, that is stories must tell and listen. Not you don't tell any stories not like that. Stories you should definitely tell to while hearing a story, then you should definitely say to anyone. That is the law of story. So, my opinion is definitely I agree with this grandmother's opinion. And what's your opinion? Discuss and write it in your notebook. Okay. Now, we can move to the next page number 37. Stories go beyond the boundaries of time and space. They lead us to wisdom. Then only we get a lot of knowledge while listening the stories. Can you tell us stories that you have heard from your grandparents, elders or friends? Can you tell a story? Definitely, yes, you can tell a story, any type of stories. Have you heard of the famous storyteller Aesop? So, have you ever heard about Aesop? He was a Greek slave who lived in 600 BC. Aesop did not, in fact, write the fables he told. They have been orally passed on from generation to generation. They still live in the minds of people. So, Aesop is a storyteller, is a Greek slave, and he lived in 600 BC. So, from that time onwards, Aesop's story fables are always go on the people's mind, always in that stories. Let's read one of Aesop's fables. So, what's meant by Aesop and the story? Fable. And what do you mean by fable? Here is a small column. Please listen that. A fable is a traditional short story that teaches a moral, especially one with animals as characters. So, Aesop's story is related with a traditional short story and teaches moral. There is a moral in that story, especially one with animals as character. In Aesop's story, there is especially an animal character is there. Here you can see an Aesop fable is there. Aesop's fables. So, our first one is Vimel's grandmother's story. This is we learned first time and second one. Now we move to the second one, that is second one is Aesop fables. Now we can go through the story. A rich voyager from Athens was on a voyage with two companions. In the course of their voyage, a violent storm blew up and capsized the ship. The companions tried to swim ashore, but the rich voyager kept calling on Athena, the goddess of Athens, and promised her lavish offerings if he escaped. One of his shipwrecked companions, as he swam past, shouted to him, "Don't leave it all to Athena. Use your arms as well." This is a small part of Aesop's story. So, the story is about a rich voyager. That means the person who travel in sea, that is voyager. A rich voyager from Athens, the story taken place in Athens, was on a voyage with two companions. So, the rich voyager and his two friends, they are traveling in the sea. In the course of their voyage, they travel. A violent storm, a violent strong wind blew up and capsized the ship, and the ship was collapsed. The companions tried to swim ashore. So, his two companions, two friends are trying to swim to ashore. But the rich voyager kept calling on Athena, the goddess of Athens. So, but this rich voyager, he never swam. He always calling Athena. Who is Athena? Athena means the goddess of Athens. He always called the god Athena and promised her lavish offering. And the rich voyager always offering lavish offerings while he escaped. While he escaped, he says that I will offer something like that. He never tried to swim to ashore. One of his shipwrecked companions, so one of his friends says that as he swam past, shouted to him. So one of his companions, both of them swam very fast, and they said, don't leave it all to Athena. So don't leave it all Athena. Don't leave it all things to God. Use your arms as well. So as well as you can swim, you please try to do that. Don't say all things to our God. That was the message. So here a rich voyager thinks that while we pray to God, God will give anything. But here the voyager never pray. He always pray, but he never tried to do anything to escape from that sea. This is a short story. What message does the fable convey? What is the message do you get from the story? Try to understand the story and convey the message. What did you get from this story? This is a small short story. Okay. So first one, Vimel's grandmother's activity, and write about grandmother's opinion. Write it in your own way. And second one, Aesop fables, and there is also a question, what message does fable convey? Now we can move to the next activity, page number 38. Given below are some proverbs and sayings. Here are some proverbs are there. Which of these can be taken as the moral of the story? Why? Here are some stories, and which proverb is apt to this Aesop fables? Don't cry over spilt milk. God helps those who help themselves. The early bird catches the worm. Barking dogs seldom bite. So which one is apt? Yes, here definitely apt. The proverb is God helps those who help themselves. What's the reason behind that? Yes, the rich voyager does not do anything. He always calling Athena. He never do anything to escape from the sea. So the correct and apt proverb is God helps those who helps themselves. Below that there are some proverbs and its meaning, and try to find out the match the following. Look at the proverbs given below. What message do they convey? Discuss. A friend in need is a friend indeed. God helps those who help themselves. So what's the inner meaning of this? The first one, a friend in need is a friend indeed. What's that? Yes, it's a definition of qualification of a friend. And second one, God helps those who help themselves. That means importance of hard work. Now before that, match the following proverb meaning. Now match each of the proverbs on the left with its meaning on the right. The first one is done for you. Proverb, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. This is the proverb, and the meaning of that proverb is, don't take the chance of losing something you have in search of something better. Now below that there are 4 more proverbs and their meanings, and try to find out the answers and match it. Second one, an apple a day keeps the doctors away. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. A stitch in time saves 9. A stitch in time saves 9. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Too many cooks spoil the broth. Too many cooks spoil the broth. And match them. So please do this work in your textbook itself. Now we can the last activity of this chapter. Your teacher will help you visit the website www.esofables.com and read the stories. You can tap this link and you get the fable stories. Match them with the morals they convey. Here also there is a match the following story and moral. Father and his sons, the fox and the lion, the fox and the goat, the lion and the bulls, Mercury and the workman. There is also a moral from this. So try to find out these also. So these two match the following. Please write it in your textbook itself. Now we can go through the actual chapter, that is page number 39. That is keep your eyes open. Our third one. Yes, keep your eyes open. The fable you have just read is very short. Yes, these two short stories are very short. So I hope you understand very well because it is very short stories. Yet it has a beginning, a middle and an end. But these two stories very short, but the story had a start, that means beginning, middle and end. This is the concept of a story. Stories generally have a beginning, a middle and an end. Definitely a story had a starting point, a middle point and at last an end. Like that, here's some of the elements of the story, and based on the story you can heard as content also. Now read the story given below. Keep your eyes open and listen. Once upon a time, there was a lion that grew so old that he was unable to kill and pray for his food. So he said to himself, I must do something or else I will die of starvation. He kept thinking and at last an idea struck him. He decided to lie down inside the cave pretending to be ill. Those who came to inquire about his health would become his prey. He put his wicked plan into practice and it started working. Many of his well-wishers got killed. But evil is short-lived. One day, a clever fox came to visit the lion. He stood at the mouth of the cave. He looked around and understood the reality. So he called out of the lion from outside and asked, How are you, sir? The lion replied, I'm not feeling well. Why don't you come inside? Then the fox replied, I would love to come in, sir, but I see all the footprints as going into your cave, but none as coming out. I would be foolish enough to come in. Saying so, the fox went to alert to other animals. An interesting story of animals. The main character of the story is a lion and a fox. A wise fox story. So, once upon a time, there was a lion. So, there was a lion that grew so old. The lion was so old that he was unable to kill any prey for his food. So, that's why he is very old lion. So, that why he can't get any food. He can't go and kill any prey to get his food. So, he said to himself. So, he thought something, some idea. I must do something or something. So, definitely I want to do something for my food. Otherwise, I will die of starvation. So, otherwise I will die. I didn't get any food. If I didn't get any food, definitely I will be die. He kept thinking and at last an idea struck him. So, finally he think and finally he got an idea and he says that he decided to lie down inside the cave pretending to be ill. So, what's the idea there? Yes, he decided to lie down. He decided to lie down inside the cave. Inside the cave, he should lie down, that pretending, that desire that he will be ill. Those who came to enquire about his health. So, those persons came to enquire about his illness would become his prey. That person become the food of lion. He put his wicked plan into practice. So, he decided to put into practice, and definitely it worked very well. He started working. Many of his well-wishers, many animals are killed like this. But evil is short-lived. But evils can short-live. It not take time along. One day a clever fox came to visit the lion to know about the illness of lion. He stood at the mouth of the cave. So, he stood only stand out the cave. He looked around. So, he is a wise fox and he kept around. He just watching around the cave and understood the reality, and he know the reality. What's the reality? So, he called out the lion from outside and asked, "How are you, sir?" So, he never go inside, and from outside he asked, "How are you, sir?" The lion replied. So, while hearing the fox sound, the lion replied, "I'm not feeling well." So, lion replied that, "I'm not feeling well." "Why don't you come inside?" And the lion asked, next question, "Why don't you come inside?" So, the wise fox replied, "I would love to come in." Yes, definitely I would like to come in, sir, but I see all the footprints as going into your cave. But I see all the animals' footprints I can see, but none has come out, but nobody has come out the cave. I would be foolish enough to come in. I am not a foolish to come in. Saying so, the fox saying so, I am not a foolish to come inside and get your prey. Now, the fox went to alert the other animals. The fox know about the lion's idea, and he was so alert, and he tell the other animals about this incident. So, this is a story of a wise fox story. And below that, so I hope you understand about this short story. This is also a short story as the story given above. What are the essential aspects of the story? Here you can see 5 columns. That 5 things are essential elements of the story. If you had a story, definitely there is an essential of stories. Here listen. Essential elements of the story: beginning, development, something happens, things come to an end, conclusion. So these are the 5 elements of essential elements of the story. First one, beginning. If there is a story need a beginning. What is the beginning of this story? Once upon a time, there was a lion that grew so old that he was unable to kill any prey for his food. This is the starting of the story, beginning of the story. Then development. If there is a story, beginning is there, then it need a development of the story. So the development is, so he said to himself, "I must do something or else I will die of starvation." He kept thinking, came to inquire about his health, would become his prey. He put his wicked plan into practice and it started working. So the other development is, so he said he want to get food and he decided an idea and he planned that idea for working. That is the development of the story. And something happens. After working this plan, there something happens based on that story. What's happened? Yes, one day a clever fox came outside the cave and he asked, and he just listening around the cave and he understood the reality what's happening there. And he says that, "How are you, sir?" And but the lion replied that, "Yes, I'm not feeling well. Why are you come inside? Why don't you come inside?" So that is something happens. What's happening in that story? And the things come to end. If there is a story beginning, development, something happens, then it need an end. Things come to an end. The final things. That is the fox replied that, "I'll search that the animals come inside. I see the footprints, the animals come inside, but none of them came out. So I know what's happening here, that I am not a foolish. That is the things come to an end portion, and at last conclusion. The story need a conclusion. What's that? The fox says that I am not a foolish. Saying so, the fox went to alert the other animals. So the fox know the idea what's happening in that cave, and he alert all other animals. So please be listen. These are the important, these are the 5 essential elements of the story. Now based on this, some of the activities are the page number 40. Let's study. The story Keep Your Eyes Open begins with the sentence, once upon a time there was a lion. Different stories may have different beginnings. Here are a few beginnings of the story. Go through them. Yes, different types of stories had different types of beginnings and ends also. Here are a few beginning of the story. That is, on the 20th of May in the evening. That is the special type of beginning. On the far side of green trees, it was a very hot day. One fine day, long ago, there was a desert wind blowing that night. These are some of the beginning of the story. So I hope you understand what are the various types of beginnings. Which one do you think is the most interesting beginning? Which one is the most interesting? Yes, try to find out which one of the interesting. Read a few folk tales and fables and make a collection of the beginning of the story. And your work is find out more beginnings of the stories. Try to find out more beginning of the stories. Write the beginnings you have collected on a chart and display it in your classroom. But unfortunately we can't display in our classroom. So please collect beginnings and write it in your notebook. Try to write a few beginning of stories. Here please try to make a beginnings. Then below that, activity 2. Now let's examine the ending of the story. Yes, if there is a beginning, there is an ending also. Can you think of a different ending of the story? Here are 2 different endings. Add a few more endings in the space provided. Here 2 more space there to complete the ending of the story. First one, write down the beginning of the stories, and second one, write down the ending of the story. So please read the examples of these endings and try to find out the ending of the story. Okay. Now I hope you understand about these 3 short stories, and it's time to wind up our today's class. Okay. Thank you.